This is an ultimate global podcast. Hello, and welcome to our special weekly podcast on trending international and social affairs. You're listening to Saurabh Kaura and George Mavros from Sydney.
Welcome again to this exciting episode that we're covering in the series of CXOs, founders and co-founders. As you already know that I've interviewed a lot of CXOs this year and a lot of CEOs and founders as well. So this is just in continuation to that, another exciting episode with a different guest from the States this time. And he's the president and CEO of Ascend Innovations. He's going to introduce yourself in a while. But the topic for today is very important. We are talking about the key elements of effective leadership. Who doesn't want to become a leader? Everyone wants to become a leader one day of their life, be it at their workplace, or if they want to start something of their own and they want to become a leader, to lead a team. And of course, there are certain skills that you need to become an effective leader, to get the maximum out of your team and to get the maximum out of your organization and deliver the best output. So we'll cover all of that. And first of all, I'll pass it on to you, Josh, if you want to introduce yourself to the audience, because generally I don't get into that introduction. I would love you to tell a bit more about yourself or what you do, where are you from, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Appreciate you having me on. I'm Josh Gratsch. I'm the president and CEO of Ascend Innovations. It's a behavioral health technology company here in Dayton, Ohio, where I'm located. Been with the company for 8 years. It's been a phenomenal experience for me. My background's in data science. And so joined the company 8 years ago as a data scientist and was positioned to help refound the company into what it is today. And basically received a crash course on leadership in becoming the CEO over the course of 5 or 6 years once I moved into my first leadership and management role. From a personal standpoint, father, husband. So I've been married to my wife for going on 10 years. I've got 3 kids, 8-year-old, 5-year-old, 2-year-old. So for me, when I think about the tenets of leadership, one of the things that's most important is topics like work-life balance and thinking about how I can not only show up for my team as a CEO, but also showing up as the dad to my kids and husband to my wife. So prior to working at Ascend, I did a little bit of work in the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, working on various initiatives such as biosurveillance, predictive analytics, things of that nature. So again, with a background in data science, like I have a lot of that technical training, and then that translated well into much of what I'm leading our company to do from a behavioral health, data and technology standpoint today.
Awesome. That's like a very short snippet of what you have said, but I'm sure we can scratch the surface, ask you more questions around what you have told on each bits of that. So one of the things that we want to talk about today is leadership, Josh. And I think anyone who would be listening to this episode, be it on LinkedIn or Apple iTunes, would be keen to know from you, what does it take to become a leader? So what are some of those qualities that a leader should have? Anybody who is a young entrepreneur or anybody who is in their 20s and they want to become a leader in the near future, what would be your advice to them?
I think first and foremost, self-awareness. We have to be able to lead ourselves first before we're able to lead others effectively. And I always start with the high level question, like, who am I? Can I adequately describe that? And for me, I've learned how to break it down into more practical chunks in terms of, what do I value? What is my purpose? What are my strengths? What are my blind spots? What fills me up in terms of energy? What drains me? When we think about that representation of who we are, that's going to help drive how we show up. And so creating some of those elements in terms of self-awareness, understanding ourselves such that when we're in hard, challenging situations, we have those guardrails to go off of, especially values when it comes to how we intend to show up as a leader. So first and foremost, investing into pursuing ourselves and really taking that inward focus, such that when we think about how we want to lead a team, that's driven first by character. And that's the second thing I'll talk about is trust. So the foundation of a high performing team is trust. If a team doesn't trust each other, they're not going to have healthy debate and conflict. They're not going to commit to a common set of good goals and objectives. They're ultimately not going to produce results. So for me, how I define trust is character plus competence. So when we think about the character elements of self-awareness and how we define our values, our principles, et cetera, that's really critical to who we are and how we show up. And then there's also the competence side. Because characters say, you're somebody I want to form a relationship with. You're somebody I trust and respect, and from a leadership perspective, want to follow. On the competence side, it demonstrates that we can produce results. And so really thinking about both of those elements in terms of especially somebody being groomed into their first leadership role, and thinking intently about like, well, what have I appreciated about those who I've experienced their leadership, and thinking through that lens first to help define, well, what do I want to emulate? What do I not want to emulate? So forming that really well-rounded understanding of leadership principles, because principles, while they can often be broad and extensible, they're also intended to be tailored to the individual, because everybody's a little bit different in their styles, especially when it comes to the strengths in their capacity to lead a team. So self-awareness, really thinking about the lens of trust, because ultimately our jobs as leaders is not what we do. That's not the value we bring. The value we bring as leaders is not what we do, is what we empower others to do. And so we got to really think intently around, okay, especially moving from an individual contributor role to especially first-time leader, first-time manager. That's a difficult transition to go through, because then we really need to think about, okay, how do I empower and align these individuals that now report to me, who often have individuals reporting to them around a common set of goals and objectives. So, I think that's critical to also think about is, how do we carry ourselves? How do we build trust with these individuals that we lead, such that then that cascades down to when, we're really working on skills like delegation, we can teach them to do the same thing, because much of leadership is not only learning, but teaching others, in which we continue to learn and evolve as we go through that process.
Yeah, I think those are really good skills that you have talked about. I've got a counter question on that, and probably just asking a bit more on what you've just told is, for people who are in the school and universities at the moment, I feel like our education system is still like 20 years behind when it comes to teaching skills for the future and teaching relevant skills which you need to use in your workplace. Do you think that the students who are young can be taught these skills at the university level by putting them into some real life projects? Because I feel like most of these skills I have learned only at the workplace. I never learned it during my university time. Like a lot of people told me theoretically that build trust, be resilient, and all those things, but I really didn't understand how to apply it till the time I was actually put into the workplace. So what do you think about it?
I think, as early as possible, getting individuals exposed to an environment where they can begin to understand the requirements for being a leader, because there's certainly I think there's innate characteristics that individuals possess. But I think leadership can be learned. And so as early as possible, getting exposed to some of the environments in which would replicate what you would experience in the workforce. I think that's imperative because, for me, even stepping into a few years into my career when I joined Ascend, I didn't look at myself as a leader. Yes, I was a captain of our athletic teams growing up. I was a captain of our college baseball team at the university I attended. But I didn't look at those things necessarily through the lens of leadership because that wasn't being taught at that time. And so, leadership to me is not a role or a title. It's a way of showing up, it's a way of behaving. And it's something I try to remind people often, especially earlier in their careers, like, hey, recognize those areas that you're already leading, the way that you're working to align a team, to be able to communicate effectively with others on your team, et cetera. Like those little things that you do, despite the fact that you're not officially leading the team by way of your title and role, how you are showing up on a day-to-day basis is truly serving in a leadership capacity. And so if you back up even further, when we think about students in university and things like that, what kind of projects can we get them involved in? What kind of teams can we get them involved in? Whether it's things within the community or even, getting into internships, co-ops, things like that, so that they can get those reps within a company. I think just getting exposed to that environment as quickly as possible, just to see how the real world operates, and then what that dynamic is like when we have an opportunity to step up and lead a team, no matter what the circumstance is, I think is incredibly beneficial. So the more we can get people those kind of opportunities early, I think is absolutely warranted, with especially how industry continues to evolve and what some of the leadership requirements are.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting answer for sure. One of the other things that I wanted to ask you was, do you also look up to some leadership figures? So often people would talk about maybe certain politicians or other CEOs or founders that they look up to, that I want to behave like them or become like them. Versus there can also be an answer that, well, you can always become like someone, but don't forget to find your own inner self, because you can take traits from somebody, but you need to understand what you are good at and kind of figure your own path by yourself. So do you look up to any leaders outside of your company?
Yeah, it's kind of a combined answer for me. So first and foremost, I had really strong mentorship here locally within Ascend in terms of prior CEOs, et cetera, that were grooming me into leadership positions. They saw things in me that I couldn't see for myself, and really helped me realize that I had the capacity to lead. So, mentorship, both inside the organization, outside the organization, was incredibly critical to my growth and development. Having other CEOs in the community that I could go have coffee with, who, not only could help me learn from their perspectives and their experiences, but more importantly, were willing to tell me the hard truth when I was in my own way. So that it doesn't feel good in the moment, especially that kind of direct feedback or constructive criticism. But I found that those are the moments that I was able to see past some of the challenges that I was working through. So I think that mentorship is incredibly important. I have a circle of individuals here locally that I go to, whenever I'm working through obstacles, adversity, challenges, et cetera. The one name that comes to mind when I think about like other leaders that I've studied, that I really resonate with their perspective. There's a woman named Kat Cole. She, I believe, is still the president and COO of a company called Athletic Greens, but has a whole career trajectory prior to that of leading large corporate companies from a very young age. And, it's just one of those things. I stumbled upon her content from various podcasts, et cetera. And something just resonated with the way that she has a very pragmatic mindset. And her framework revolves all around the combination of courage, confidence, curiosity, and humility, and really operating at the intersection of those four characteristics and qualities in a way that says, hey, I'm going to show up and I'm going to be confident and demonstrate that I know what I'm talking about, but I'm also going to be curious and humble to say I don't know everything. And that really influenced me early on, of thinking about the way I wanted to lead, especially when it comes to thinking through the lens of operating in the and, not the or. And what I mean by that is leadership, I found, is often a combination of multiple characteristics and qualities, right? So just to give a couple of examples of what I mean by that, I mean, confidence and humble is an easy example to say, I want to demonstrate that I'm capable, and I want to demonstrate that I'm willing to listen to others and hear other perspectives, et cetera. So, yeah, she was somebody that I listened to early on, and I've tried to listen to every piece of content that she puts out. Somebody I really respect.
Yeah, that's excellent. And you talked about one thing called as mentors. So I think having mentors in life is so important. I've had so many mentors in my life in the last 5 years after I came to Australia. And I've been sharing these stories on LinkedIn as well, how coming to Australia kind of changed my life. But having mentors plays a really, really critical role, not only in leadership. I feel it's an overall personality development, because what a mentor who is 20, 30 years older than you can see in you can dramatically change the way you look into your life, and then you start taking actions in the right direction. So if somebody is looking to find mentors, and sometimes I get this question quite a lot, like, how did you find your mentor? Um, I think you don't have to find a mentor. If somebody really finds the potential in you, they would automatically reach out to you. You can also go out on LinkedIn and start forming connections, genuine connections. You never know who is there out there to genuinely help you out in building a better version of yourself. So what's your advice on people looking out for mentors, and the role of mentorship in making more effective leaders?
Yeah, I think number one, pursue it, because it's not always going to come to you. Because I think there's value in having multiple mentors and a diverse set of mentorship. Especially like from my perspective of running a company as a CEO and not having been a CEO before, I really benefited from surrounding myself with individuals that know multiple aspects of leading a team, running a company, considering the finances, developing a culture, right? And finding those individuals that are specialized in each of those things or have a lot of experience in each of those areas, that then, I can ask very in-depth questions and, begin to shift how I think about different things and learn new concepts. And then, of course, beyond just learning, integrate those concepts. And so, yeah, I think having a well-rounded, quote unquote, board of advisors, aka mentors, that we can go to. But first, you got to form those relationships, right? And my advice on that is, like, just reach out to people, be genuine, ask them for coffee, ask them for lunch, and don't say, "Can I pick your brain?" Say, "Hey, I'm working through this challenge, or I'm at this stage in life and I'm working through these things. I see that you've done X, Y, and Z, and I really think that I could learn from your perspectives, and the hindsight and lessons that you have, to help continue to develop myself." Somebody that truly is invested in leadership and wants to help people is going to respond well to that. And so just being very intentional with the outreach, offering to buy somebody lunch or coffee for their time, and really taking advantage of that in a way of asking curious questions, and again, being very intentional about that time that you get to spend with that person. And oftentimes I found, like, those relationships begin to form, and then even sometimes that individual will reach out to you and say, "Hey, how are you doing? I'd love to check in." And I think I found that especially some of those longer term relationships are critical when we think about mentorship. It's I'm not saying it's not valuable to have like, hey, a coffee with this one person that has this one specific set of knowledge that I want to dig into. But I've also found a ton of value in just maintaining those relationships over the years, that those individuals know me, they know my tendencies, and so they're can get really specific with me, especially when it comes to coaching me through certain situations, and helping me shift my perspective when I'm in my own way, etc.
Yep. And I think one of the things that you previously talked about was confidence. Confidence is something which you build over a period of time, but is something which I feel sometimes if you are lagging, and if you find a really strong mentor who is having those many years of experience, can also instill that confidence in you if you find the right mentor at the right stage of your life. One of the last questions from my side is on the topic of growth mindset. So we talk about this concept of having a growth mindset versus having a fixed mindset, and a lot of those differences that we talk about, I guess, can be linked back to effective leadership and the skill that we talked about. When we say fixed mindset, it's all about thinking in one way. It's all about not learning anything new because we just want to sit inside that comfort zone that we are in, inside that bubble. We don't want to burst that bubble and come out of it. And I think that's where your growth begins. And that's where you start thinking differently. And that's where you start learning new things. And that kind of leads to effective leadership as well. So, do you see any linkage between having a growth mindset and also leading teams in a mature manner?
Yes. And primarily because I believe it speaks to our desire to not only improve, but evolve. And I draw a distinction there because when we think about running a team, running a business, we're constantly going to be thrown curveballs, whether it's industry changes, tech changes, whatever the case may be. We constantly have to adapt and be resilient to those situations and circumstances. I mean, it's just the way it is. And that's one of the biggest perspectives I have on working through challenges. Don't be surprised by them. Don't be surprised by the curveball that you expect to come from the pitcher, to use a baseball analogy, but it actually comes out of left field that the rules say that's not possible. Well, those things happen. The like life and leadership business is going to present some of these random things that get thrown at us. And the biggest thing I try to do is not be surprised by them, and build plans, etc., that can be flexible and adapt. And I think growth mindset lends itself to that, to say, hey, I know I'm confident in these competencies. I'm confident in the way that I'm showing up. I'm confident in my ability to lead the team. And the humility part is, I know I also have a lot to learn. Like for me, I've been in a CEO role for 2 years. And while I've started to get my feet under me, I also know that, wow, like there's so many things that I still don't know. There's still so many experiences that I've yet to have. And so I think, having that mindset is important, but making sure that it's intentional and purposeful. And what I mean by that is, a high level phrase like always be learning. Like, yes, and there's also a bridge to cross from knowledge to integration and application, right? So ensuring that like we're consuming I've got all these books on my shelves. I read many books on business and leadership. And I finally got to the point over the last year where I'm like, okay, what if I just sat down the consumption of new information and new learning and started to look at the knowledge that I've already acquired where I've yet to really apply? And I think that's important to a learning mindset, to keep it tempered and measured and say, have purpose for the learning, like have priorities, have focus in terms of the areas that we want to grow and develop. Because without focus, then we're focused on it. Then we're looking at 1,000 different things in which we're not making meaningful progress in any of those areas. And obviously that's not only important for us individually, that's important collectively as we're leading by example and demonstrating to the team that like, hey, we constantly want to be measuring ourselves against ourselves and looking for ways to get a little bit better every single week, every single day, every single year. So yeah, I think, having that perspective that we're constantly willing to grow and evolve, develop, and provide the same benefit to others as when it comes to empowering them to find that path in which they can identify that trajectory that works for them in term development. I think that's crucial to effective leadership.
Yep, and absolutely. I think you've touched upon all the points that I was thinking in my mind already. So thank you so much for sharing those insights. And I think this is going to be really, really interesting episode when it is rolled out, because you have shared some golden tips around leadership. And of course, everyone has got different experiences when it comes to leadership, but they can always learn from each other. And I think that's where the podcast plays a major role, when different CEOs come on different episodes and share their own level of experiences. That's where you can understand different insights and get into that discussion. But thank you so much for your time, Josh. Appreciate that. And I hope you enjoyed this discussion with me as much as I did.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Saurabh. I enjoyed the conversation and looking forward to maybe doing it again in the future.
This is an Ultimate Global Podcast. Hello, and welcome to our special weekly podcast on trending international and social affairs. You're listening to Saurabh Kora and George Mavros from Sydney.